Hi, and welcome to the Pit Lane, a Formula One podcast where we chat about everything F1. We head into the desert to race in Bahrain for the fourth race of the year. Can McLaren extend their lead? Will Max pull another win out of the bag? This is the 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix. I am your host, Jordan Wynn, and alongside me is my co-host, Alden Kwell. How are you doing this week, Alden?
Very good, Jordan. It's nice to be back. We had two races while we were gone, and one was good and one was not so good.
Yeah, and the one that was not so good we'll briefly touch on first, as it was in the previous weekend, which was the Japanese Grand Prix. But there was a little bit of news that we'll start with first, as we always do. Yuki Tsunoda was promoted to Red Bull, I think, less than 24 hours after our last podcast went out. That we extensively talked about this move, demoting Liam Lawson to Racing Bulls or Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. What are your thoughts on that?
They promoted Tsunoda just ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix. That had to have been very exciting for Yuki to race in Red Bull in front of his home crowd. Feel bad for Lawson. He definitely, I don't think showed how good he was in the Red Bull. It just, maybe the car didn't suit him. Maybe he was sort of in his head at the end there. But it was probably the right thing to do for Red Bull. And I'm happy for Yuki. I mean, I think he maybe didn't have the best race at home, and we'll get into that just a little bit, but this was definitely, I think, the correct move for all parties involved.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know what you think.
Yeah, and I know we talked about it extensively last time, but yeah, no, I agree. I wish it would have happened, or I wish Tsunoda was promoted to begin with. So Lawson wasn't in this situation for his sake. But yeah, that puts Lawson probably in a more comfortable role for now, not so much pressure, and Tsunoda gets into, the flagship team for his home Grand Prix, which did, bring a lot of pressure, but I think it's something that he's deserved at this point and should be able to handle going forward. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this. Well, hopefully the rest of the season with Tsunoda in the Red Bull seat.
Yeah, same.
Some other news, Robert Reed resigned as the FIA vice president. Is that right?
Yep.
I believe some of the comments he had afterwards about his resignation mentioned he didn't like the direction the FIA was going, and alongside other differences, like he just didn't agree with some of the things that were happening. So he supposedly resigned as the FIA vice president.
This is pretty big news. The turnover over at the FIA has been extensive over the last 2 years, I want to say. You can kind of correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jordan, but the last couple departures have been very senior figures within the FIA who have not sort of enjoyed the tenure of the current boss over there. And yeah, it's just the latest departure, and it's sort of showing the latest schisms within the FIA, and we'll see how this all sort of plays out, but not looking good over there.
Yeah, and how long is Ben Salayem elected for? Is he up this year for
Either
president of FIA?
Yeah, it'll either be later this year or early next year. I don't know the exact timeline on that. I don't know if they're on calendar year or some other measurement, but I know he's got to be up sooner or later.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. But yeah, like you said, there's been a lot of turnover in the FIA recently, in the past couple of years, mostly under this regime or this president. So yeah, interesting to see what happens going forward. But like I said, let's talk about the Japanese Grand Prix very briefly here. Yuki looked good. I mean, in his first session as Red Bull, or in the Red Bull team. But yeah, after that, I think he had a tough qualifying session and kind of qualified out of the top 10. I think he started like 15th or something. Is that right? He got out of Q1 but didn't get into Q3. But yeah, Max actually surprisingly started on pole, and the race was pretty boring. There's really not much to say about the race other than there was virtually no passing unless you had a crazy, crazy tire offset or you're Liam Lawson and kind of push somebody out of the way. So, yeah, there's that. But Max ends up winning essentially start to finish. And, yeah, Yuki ended up P12 in his Red Bull debut. The McLaren's got a double podium with Norris second, Piastri third. I know Piastri wanted to switch places with Norris's to try and get past Max as they were all pretty tight together most of the race, but that call never came. The Ferrari, Charles was P4 and Hamilton P7. Russell P5, Antonelli P6. Something to note there. Kimi Antonelli is the youngest driver to lead a Grand Prix at 18 years old. The Racing Bulls, Isaac Hadjar got his first points of the year, I believe, with a P8. Lawson finished P17. Williams, Alex Albon with a P9. He had a strong race. Carlos Sainz, P14. Ollie Behrman in the Haas was P10. Ocon P18. Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso P11. Lance Stroll was dead last, P20. Alpine, Pierre Gasly was P13. Duhan P15. And the Saubers were pretty bad. Yeah, Hulk P16 and Bortoletto was P19. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I would. The only thing I would add was that Antonelli beat Max Verstappen's record for youngest driver to lead an F1 race by all of 3 days.
It was 3 days. I didn't realize it was that close.
I think it was 3 days, if I remember correctly, from this most recent weekend when they told us yet again. But yeah, no. The only other thing I'll add was that there was rain just before the race started, and if the rain had continued, I think the race would have been far more interesting. But sadly, we weren't given that opportunity. The circuit was pretty much drying or dried when the cars took to the circuit for the start. So too bad, but like you said, yeah, it was a bit of a procession, kind of boring. Max had a great performance in the Red Bull, which had an awesome livery for the weekend, and a sort of Honda homage, all white with red. It looked great. So yeah, good for Max. And the McLaren showed that they're still very strong, but yeah, Suzuka, tough circuit to pass on given the current design of the cars.
Yeah, and like you said, the rain, definitely cooled down the temperatures too. So there's essentially no tire deg. Which, yeah, made it a very difficult race for anybody to pass. So we should also note that Haas also had a special livery. I don't know if the liveries came out before our last podcast or not, but Haas had one with a bunch of cherry blossoms on it. It was more pink within their white spaces and stuff with cherry blossoms all over it. So it was kind of cool. I thought it looked pretty good. But yeah, just something.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, it definitely looked better, I think, on TV than it did in the pictures, seeing it move. I think the only thing which we both agreed on was that the front wing still had a bit too much red on it. And if that had been sort of changed to pink instead of red, it would have been very striking, but perhaps maybe too much alike the Alpine. So maybe they decided not to go that direction.
Yeah. Nope, totally agree. Should we get into Bahrain?
Yes, let's go.
So we'll start with the practice sessions. Obviously 3 practice sessions, and McLaren's were fastest in all 3 sessions. Kind of no surprise. There was a surprise, kind of. There were 6 teams that fielded their young drivers, getting those out of the way in FP1. Hirakawa drove for Haas, and he just drove for Alpine last week, I believe, right? And Haas
in Japan. Yeah.
But Haas signed him up as a reserve driver. Bogdanovic drove for Ferrari, Vesti for Mercedes, Dragovic again for Aston Martin, Browning for Williams, and Iwasa for Red Bull. So something to note, a lot of these young drivers are getting their experience in, and the teams are meeting the requirements for having young drivers in FP1. The teams were here just, like a month and a half ago, not quite, for testing, so it only makes sense to get some young drivers in here for practice sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the normal drivers have certainly had their share of the Bahrain circuit, so it's a good opportunity for the young drivers to get some testing done here, and I bet it also probably helps them with data that the teams have back at the base because they have the most data from this circuit, having done all the testing, so they can do some sort of like correlations between the real car and the simulator back at base. But yeah, no, good for so these drivers. It was nice to see them out there.
Get into qualifying. Qualifying was at night, and this is our first night race of the year. So these conditions are very similar to FP2. Q1, the exits were Albon, Lawson, Bortoletto, Stroll, and Bierman. Norris was fastest in Q1. Hamilton was second, and Hulk, quote unquote, just knocked out Albon to get into Q2. But his lap actually ends up getting deleted later in the sessions, as in, I don't know, Q3. They deleted Hulk's second lap time that would have kept Albon in qualifying, but it was too late. So, yeah, Hulk just got essentially demoted. Did he start P20?
He ended up starting 16th.
16th. So yeah, very unfortunate for Albon. He should have made it into Q2, but yeah, the FIA and the stewards missed Hulk's boundary going out of the white lines of the track to get his lap invalidated. So yeah, very unfortunate for Albon in Q1.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head, Jordan. Too bad for Albon. Through no fault of his own, he probably should have been in Q2. Not probably, he just should have been. Again, also no fault of Hulkenberg's, right? Like it's not his fault it's not his responsibility to police his lap time. He's just kind of going where he's told to go. But it just kind of looks bad, I think, for the event that someone can be disqualified or had their lap time deleted some 45 minutes later in 2 sessions down the line. But yeah, I think no surprises for who went out. Bierman notably started last. Before this, he had 2 consecutive point finishes in China and Japan. So maybe a little bit surprising to see him out. But yeah, we'll kind of get through to all of this. And this is just the start of a pretty wild weekend for Hulkenberg, which we'll get to as the podcast goes on.
And something else to note with that, the FAA mentioned that they missed it because it wasn't one of the main focus points for boundary or track limit infringements. I think it was turn 11 he went wide on. So, yeah, I think it was Aston Martin that protested Hulk, and then they looked at it and like, oh, yep, he was, had a track limits infringement and got his lap time deleted. And the reasoning was, yeah, it wasn't one of the main corners, and they didn't go and take a second look at it. So,
wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, they did come out with an actual statement after the session. So it was interesting that they actually did that because the FIA usually does not do that almost ever. So they're like, yep, we messed up. So let's move on, I guess. Q2, Jack Doohan, Isaac Hadjar, Nico Hulkenberg, Fernando Alonso, and Esteban Ocon all out. Ocon had a pretty big crash opposite of where Roman Grosjean car or crash was, if that makes sense, when he had his big crash. Yeah, no time set for Ocon. Forced other drivers to change their qualifying plans. Piastri was fastest in Q2, and Norris was only a 10th behind. And surprise, Gasly was just less than a 10th behind Norris. Gasly was very quick in qualifying and all weekend. But yeah, there was a big crash for Ocon.
Yeah, he kind of lost it coming out of turn 3. It just ended up spinning the back end of the car around. He ended up crashing into the wall. He did not set a time, but this was kind of like, 2 or 3 minutes into the session. Not a lot of folks had sort of set times, or if they had set times, it was the first lap. A lot of cars were kind of out on their out lap. So kind of basically just like gave us an abbreviated session after the red flag. But yeah, like you mentioned, Gasly, just an incredible qualifying weekend really for him. To be only a 10th behind one of the McLarens shows maybe how good of a drive he's having at the moment. Like his form is just reached another level, or maybe there's something in this car, like this circuit really suits their car. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear sort of what you think is behind his performance this weekend on the qualifying.
Gasly's?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe they just work something out through testing and have a good setup. I'm not sure, but he looked really good and he was fast in all of qualifying. Yeah, I don't know. And I think I remember in like Q3 he was purple in the second sector or something too, with his second lap. Like he was flying. Like it was no fluke either. So I don't know if they had more downforce through that segment than everybody else or what, but he was really on it. So yeah, I don't know. I just assume it suit their car pretty well because I think Duhan actually did well too in qualifying. It's just
yeah.
I think the Gasly's experience, pulled through for him in the end. So hopefully it continues for them. They need some good results.
No, absolutely. And just looked it up. They did not have any upgrades this weekend, so this is pretty much the car they had last time out.
Q3, Oscar Piastri took pole. George Russell was second, and kind of the big surprises here was Lando Norris was sixth, and Max Verstappen was seventh. Hulkenberg had a lap time deleted. Oh no, we talked about that. Sorry. Blah. Let's see. Oh, we don't have their starting position. That's okay. And then Tsunoda actually did set a second lap time. It was just the first one that went through, so I don't know if you caught that or not.
When I watched the replay, the lap that he was showing at the very, very end, maybe that was a cooldown lap then.
Yeah, because it was like 22 seconds behind or something.
Yeah, I thought like he went off and so he just gave up.
No, so if you look at like the segment timing screen, that portion, because I was like browsing Reddit or whatever afterwards. I'm like, oh, what happened to Tsunoda? And someone's like, oh, he actually did set a lap time. It was faster than his first, but it just wasn't, as good as everybody else's improvements. Yeah.
Wow, because his second lap then was 1.5 seconds slower than the McLaren's.
Right.
Than Piastri. Oh my goodness.
Right.
That is not good.
No.
I guess I don't know if that just really shows. Number one, Tsunoda is no slouch, right? Like Max was, like you said, seventh, so maybe the Red Bull just wasn't set up very well this weekend in Bahrain, or that the McLarens are just that far ahead. They kind of are, and maybe it's a little bit of both, but that is a substantial gap between Yuki and Oscar.
Yeah, huge gap. But something else to note, both drivers were noted for entering the pit lane before the restart of Q2 when Ocon crashed. When the session was about to restart, they went out before the time was posted. When the restart time was posted, they went out before that. So they both ended up getting 1 place penalties.
That was both of the Mercedes drivers?
Yes.
Right. So then Russell, even though he qualified second, he ended up starting third.
Correct.
And then Antonelli, who qualified fourth, ended up starting fifth.
Which promoted Gasly to fourth.
Right, second row for him. And then the whole the whole shakedown of the Hulkenberg lap deletion in Q3 was that Albon, even though he went out in Q1, ended up starting 15th. Hulkenberg moved down to 16th. And then Ocon, who never even set a time in Q2, ended up qualifying 14th.
Because he went out.
Because he went out. Yeah, just
and crashed.
Another weird situation. 3 drivers, 2 of which who didn't do anything in Q3 ended up having their positions changed in Q3.
Right. I'm curious, was Hulkenberg's time in Q1 faster? Was that the fastest one in Q1 of the guys that got eliminated? I never went back and looked.
Yeah, Hulkenberg in Q1, Hulkenberg set the 15th fastest lap.
Right.
Just beating out Albon.
Right, but that time got deleted. So was his was Hulkenberg's fastest valid lap the fastest of those that got eliminated in Q1?
I see. I don't know.
Okay. I'm just curious for my own sake. I feel like I should have looked at it now, but anyways, we're getting a little sidetracked. I'm just curious of how they decided to do it. If they're just like, oh well, Hulk went out in Q2, set some laps, and then they just put him to 16th because he set some laps, or did they put him 16th because he actually had the fastest lap of those that were eliminated? You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying. Great question.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and take a look at that. I'm just interested for my own sake. But yeah, shall we get in the race?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was only one thing that we missed, but I think for the race, for the pre-race stuff, was Norris and his grid box.
Oh yeah. So let's start there. Lando Norris, straight out the box, got a 5-second penalty, literally straight out of the box, because his car was outside of the starting grid of his starting box lines. So his wheels were in front of the yellow line that they put out there, or was he fully in front of the white line that they mark? Because they have a yellow line for the tires, and then they have a white line for
I think it was the yellow line.
Yeah, so he was outside of that. Max reported it naturally because he was to his left looking at Norris. And reporter's like, oh, yep, Lando's outside of his starting grid box. And yep, noted, send it to FIA, 5-second penalty. Norris actually got a really good start on the line and didn't he gain 2 positions right away?
Yep.
So it was a great start for him. I don't think the starting box infringement really helped him, but it's illegal. So, inherently it helps him, but I don't think it would have made a difference with the start. So yeah, he had a great start. But yeah, Piastri got off the grid well. We had one safety car during this race, which was a crash between, I don't want to say crash, but more of a incidents where Yuki ran into Carlos Sainz. I think his rear tires hit the side pod of Carlos Sainz, had a bunch of damage, sprayed out of turns 1 and 2. So they had a safety car there, which brought the field back together at one point. But yeah, Oscar Piastri kind of drove away at the start of the race from McLaren. He was pretty far ahead. At the first pit stops, I think it was 10 seconds ahead of Russell or so.
That sounds about right.
And yeah, he ended up about 15 and a half seconds ahead of Russell. And that's with a safety car with 18 laps to go, 20 laps to go or something like that. So yeah, huge race for Piastri. He goes essentially start to finish, leading the race, minus the pit stop phases. But yeah, he, was very good. Didn't put a foot wrong all weekend and won the Grand Prix, and he looks great.
Yeah, he looks like in top form. He had a decisive victory. Didn't put a foot wrong. Great pit stops. Just honestly, the race director didn't even, or the for the TV viewer, we barely saw Piastri because he was just it just wasn't where the battle was. But yeah, he looks in top form. Hopefully he can continue that going forward. Norris is no slouch. He had a difficult qualifying, plus the 5-second penalty from his pit box infringement. So yeah, Oscar's got to capitalize on these moments when there's issues to Lando, and he did, and he scored 25 points for himself. So big deal.
Yeah, big deal for him for sure. As we said, Piastri P1. His teammate Lando Norris ends up P3 for the race. He, with his 5-second penalty, he served that at his pit stop. I believe it was more of a 2-stop race for most people. Ends up P3. He had a little bit of battle with Charles Leclerc a little bit. He also made a mistake battling Charles. I think he had a pretty bad lockup, went deep into turn 1, cost him a bit of time, potentially cost him second place and getting past Russell. But yeah, ends up getting past Charles Leclerc for P3. Overall, his weekend not up to his standards, and I think he had some interviews this weekend that said, I didn't do the job, and he was kind of probably pretty hard on himself, but he didn't be so hard on himself. But still got a podium. Obviously, he doesn't want to drop points to Piastri, but yeah, still overall got good points haul for him and the team.
Yeah, I think if you consider that the qualifying is what it is, P3 from P6 is good damage control. He maintains his lead in the championship, the drivers' championship, by what, 1 point, Jordan?
3.
Okay, so
it was 1, now it's 3.
That works for him, and this is his 4th straight podium finish of the year. So, I think he's doing everything that he can, everything that he needs to do. Finishing on the podium every race will be important, and not only for the drivers but the constructors championship. So we'll see where it goes for him. But yeah, another driver who's had a lot of podium finishes this year was George Russell, and boy, did he have a difficult last 20 laps or so. I'll let you spill the details on it, but yeah, what a drive from him, to say just at first.
Yeah, no, I agree. Russell, another strong drive for him, showing he can be a team leader at Mercedes. With the P2 finish, he's been top 5 in all 4 races. He wrestled home a car that was ailing due to electronic failures. Where do we start? The DRS, or his transponder, stopped working, is where everybody first noticed he was having electronic issues, especially if you were watching on TV. They got rid of the scoring or the timing screen for a while because it would show him last. His transponder was only getting picked up at certain areas of the racetrack. So it was only getting updated at certain areas of the racetrack, and it was all haywire. He had a bunch of other electronic issues that were happening. Like his controls weren't doing what they thought they were. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of list of issues. He opened up his DRS on the back straight when supposedly he hit some other button. I think I heard that
he hit his radio button.
Yeah, that it was his radio button, and his DRS opened on the back straight. So, and he actually got called into the stewards after the race for that. Didn't get a penalty for that, which is good. He didn't really gain an advantage while doing it, so FIA wasn't worried about that. But yeah, it was a crazy race for him. It also affected those around him also, because the automatic sensors with the transponder that would also correlate to the car in front and behind him. Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris would each need to activate their DRS. I mean, they do it manually, but they would need to do it knowing they're within the second versus having it, activated just because it's within the second, if that makes sense. The teams were... Sorry, go ahead.
No, it was a very wonky situation. I would just remember specifically one radio message from his race engineer said something like, if the dash goes out, just keep driving as you are, which is a pretty scary message to hear from your race engineer, that you're going to lose all the information on your little, screen on your steering wheel.
Yeah, I also heard he had to do something with his brakes too manually, like every lap or something. So, and he wouldn't know if his brake pedal would be normal braking or would go to the floor. I heard that afterwards too.
Wow.
George, a lot to handle. Pretty remarkable in the end if you think about it, that he ended up P2. Just showing how strong he's actually been this year, and especially during this race at the end of the weekend. His teammate Kimi Antonelli, he got caught up with the safety car. He pitted a couple laps before the safety car came out, so that caught him out, put him back a few places. I think he was running P6 at the time before the second pit stops went, and he, pit before the safety car came out. Ultimately, couldn't get back up into the points and ends up P11. So a little bit disappointing for him. More situational based than anything else. So very unfortunate for him.
Yeah, no, tough. big difference between P2 and P11. And I don't think it's Antonelli's fault that he finished P11. So he'll just have to keep plugging away.
Yep. No, I agree. Ferrari brought 5 upgrades to this race event. I didn't realize that it was that much. But didn't help him a ton, supposedly. I mean, Charles Leclerc, P4. Lewis Hamilton, P5, actually, after starting P9th. So good climb for him. I think they both benefited from the safety car coming out when it did as well. They both did mediums to start the race. So they were on effectively a 3 or a 2-stop strategy anyways, as at least everybody were, and they actually came in and put on hards at the end of the race, which I don't think either of them liked. But yeah, still solid finish for them. Ultimately, probably the best they could have hoped for this weekend, I would think. P4 and P5 for them, and Ferrari to kind of, I don't know. It's probably the most points haul they've had this season, right? In a weekend?
Yes. If you specifically after China, after they were disqualified.
Yeah.
But yes, also they had a great double stack in the pits during the safety car.
Oh, that's right.
It was beautifully orchestrated. Hamilton was had a big gap to Leclerc, not a big gap, but a gap large enough where they could do that, and it just ended up working out perfectly for him.
Yeah. So good finish for Ferrari this weekend. So this brings us to Red Bull. I don't think we've talked about Red Bull this late in the podcast before in race finishes, since we probably started. Max Verstappen ends up P6 in the race. He got past Pierre Gasly on the last lap to take that P6 from Pierre. But they had a lot of issues during the race as well. Weird pit stop things. Max's first pit stop, notably, when they stopped, they have an automatic light that goes off in front of them from red to green when the lug nuts are all tightened all the way and the car's dropped. And once the car dropped for Max, the light didn't turn green. So he was about to go, and he actually lunged forward, released the clutch a little bit, and then stopped again because the light didn't go. So he's worried, there's an issue with the lug nuts weren't tightened all the way. And then he just took off because he waited another, second and a half, 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. And the lights were still red. So that cost him, I think, at least a position or two on track during the pit stops, which was unfortunate. Same thing happened to Yuki as well on his first pit stop. So that was unfortunate. I'm not sure if that cost him a couple of positions or not on track, but yeah, pit stop issues for Red Bull doesn't usually happen ever, and they had twice in the first pit stop. And Max also had a issue in a second pit stop with his right front tire.
That's right. I forgot that
right gun wasn't working to start the pit stop. So yeah, and it was noticeably in the car that he was shaking his head from the overhead cam while it was going on. So Max not happy with the pit stops or the car this weekend. So not a great weekend for Red Bull all in all. And Yuki was probably happy he finished P9 and got some points for Red Bull.
Yeah, his first points of the season and as a Red Bull driver. So congrats to Yuki. That's a big achievement. What a outlandish statement to say. Max Verstappen finishes P6 and he's considered as one of the worst weekends he's had. He's used to winning. He doesn't like finishing anything outside of the P1. So a P6 finish just isn't good enough for him. But, it's also not his fault that the release system wasn't working or that the mechanic was having issues with the gun on the second stop. So maybe they can sort this out in the next couple of races. We remember how quickly McLaren turned it around last year. But, Red Bull look like the 4th fastest team at the moment.
I should note Yuki did get points in the sprint race in China, so for VCARB, but it was his first points of the season during a race or during a Grand Prix, I guess. But yeah, Alpine, as we mentioned, Pierre Gasly got bipped by Max Verstappen on the last lap for P6, so he ends up P7. But he had a really good drive this weekend. Obviously qualified really well and started P4 on the grid. It's the first points for Alpine this season. Gets them on the board. Gets them to ninth place, I believe. And tied with Sauber for the season. But yeah, great race for him. Jack Doohan, he was running in the points, but kind of ran out of gas, ran out of tires. He ends up P14. I don't believe he pitted during the safety car, which got him some track position. And yeah, his tires just ended up running out with about 5-6 laps to go and kind of dropped like a stone there. But still, he drove a solid race as well.
Yeah, no, Gasly had a great race. I felt bad for Doohan. He got passed by 3 cars with the span of, I don't know, 2 laps. It's tough going for him. You mentioned the safety car kind of caught him out. He had just changed onto hard, so he stayed out. Got track position, but nothing going for him after that. But really happy for Pierre Gasly, who has really sort of, like we said, yeah, it was fast all weekend. He was running P6 until Max got him on the last lap. So he's got a lot to be proud of.
Brings us to Haas. Esteban Ocon, P8 from P15, I believe. So great drive from him. And Oliver Behrman, P10 from last place, and he scores a point for Haas. Clearly, they had a fast car this weekend based on that performance, or at least race pace. I don't know if you go back to our testing podcast at the beginning of the year. All Haas did was long runs and race runs. So they definitely put that to work this weekend, and it paid off for them in the end. And they have moved up to 5th in the championship ahead of Williams. So yeah, that's huge for them this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely huge. Especially the Ocon drive. He was remember he crashed out in qualifying, so the team had to rebuild the car. Bierman started last. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that as a team, right? And they ended up both scoring points in the race. So clearly their hard work paid off for them. This team needs as many points as they can get. So this is a big deal. And, they surpassed Williams. So we'll get to them next. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, Williams, Alex Albon, P12, and Carlos Sainz with a DNF after colliding with Yuki Tsunoda. I know Yuki ran into the back of him a little bit in turn 1, and also had a little moment exiting Q or second corner, rear wheel, hit Carlos Sainz as we mentioned, and caused a lot of damage, basically opening up that side pod, and Carlos Sainz started dropping like a stone after that, and ends up retiring the car, which is unfortunate because it seems like he was having a pretty good weekend up until that point.
Yeah, his second retirement of the year, but you're absolutely right. He was going strong. I think he dive bombed someone into turn 11, pushed them wide. I don't know if he received a penalty for that.
Was that after the restart?
I think it was.
Or was it early?
It might have been, or it might have been earlier. No, because the safety car would have been his. I don't know.
Oh yeah. You're right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough finish, P12 and a DNF from them. I think their car was a little bit stronger than that, and certainly has been so far this season. But yeah, it's too bad for them, especially the damage to Sainz's car.
Yeah, very unfortunate weekend for Williams, and they're looking forward to moving on to Saudi Arabia, I believe. Racing Bulls, Isaac Hadjar, P13, Liam Lawson, P16. He had an interesting weekend, got 2 penalties this weekend, 2 penalty points on his driving record, and 15 seconds total worth of penalties.
Yeah, not good for him. Second weekend out of the Red Bull, and he's still collecting penalties and isn't really showing that he's any different in this car. We'll see if he can sort of correct this going forward, but not looking good so far. And then Aston Martin, P15 for Alonso, P17 for Stroll. Kind of nowhere all weekend. I mean, to be slower than the Racing Bulls, Jordan, I'd be interested to hear what you think with their performance.
Yeah, they did not have a good weekend. There wasn't much screen time with them, to be fair, either. Yeah, a whole lot of nothing. Alonso hasn't scored points this weekend. Lance has scored, I think, twice this year. But yeah, not a good weekend for them. They were nowhere all weekend, didn't qualify well. Race pace wasn't there. Yeah, I don't know where they're at right now. They're a bit of a mystery. They don't feel like they're contenders for the top of the midfield either. Um, they're probably closer to Sauber than they are to Haas, I feel like, in my opinion. But yeah, that's where I feel like they're at right now.
Yeah, I would agree. Feel bad for Alonso. He's retired, twice already this year. I think Australia was a little bit his fault in that weird weather. But aside from Stroll's, what was that, P6 in Australia and some points that he collected in China, the team has really struggled over the last couple of weekends. So hopefully they can correct that. But, someone's got to be down there. And right now it's them.
And they are right next to Sauber. Nico Hulkenberg finished P13 in the race, but turns out afterward he was disqualified due to excessive plank wear. This has caught a few people out this year, namely, Lewis Hamilton and who else? Somebody else was it Gasly?
Gasly, yeah.
Both caught out for plank wear this year. So yeah, not a great weekend for Sauber, and Bortoletto was P18. Not great.
No. So just to recap for Hulkenberg, he entered Q2 thinking that he had gone through. Then in Q3, he found out that his lap time that he set in Q3 was deleted. So he ended up qualifying 16th. Then during the race, he was clattered into by, I think it was...
Was that Lawson?
Lawson, yep.
Yep.
So he took damage from that, albeit maybe minor. And then at the end of the race, finished P13 during the race, but then was disqualified. So basically was disqualified from the race, told his fastest lap during qualifying was no good, and then also got ran into. So not a great weekend for Nico Hulkenberg, sadly.
Yeah, he's ready for Audi to come in, I think. Get this ship sorted out, I think.
Change all of it. Change the engine, change the livery, change the suits, change the sponsors.
Right.
He's ready.
Definitely. This brings us to our winners and losers segment. Who do you have for your winners this weekend, Alden?
I've got Oscar Piastri. He qualified very strongly. He had some great practice sessions. I think it was in FP2 or 3. He was just leagues faster than everyone else. And then he won the race, just, doing his own little thing. P2 was Russell, who was probably ahead of Norris just by qualifying happenstance. So, yeah, even Oscar's, closest rival, Norris, who's currently leading the Drivers' Championship, he just was nowhere near him all weekend. So my winner is Oscar Piastri, and I'm curious who you have.
I have Haas for the weekend. With poor qualifying and coming all the way back to get a double points finish for a midfield team is huge. And it moves them up to 5th place, which is probably very coveted this year, especially if they can keep their car in form like this and move into next year with some good momentum. So, yeah, I have Haas as my winner. And also because I didn't want to pick Piastri as well. So, because you picked him already. Losers, I'm going to go with Aston Martin. Really tough weekend for them, as we just previously mentioned, and just a little bit of nowhere. They're kind of floating toward the bottom right now. Hopefully that they can get that resurrected before next year. But I'm sure Adrian Newey would love to have all the win time he can get also. So there's that.
Yeah, I guess that is... No, that is one benefit from their current position. My loser is going to be Carlos Sainz. I think the damage that he sustained obviously wasn't really his fault. Yuki and him kind of just had a racing incident. I don't think either one of them got a penalty for it, which I think is the right call. Sadly, though, for Carlos, he ended up having to retire the car, his second retirement in the Williams. He's got a solitary point for the season so far, so probably not the start that he wished for. But yeah, I just feel bad for him. I see he wasn't really overdriving the car. He wasn't really, underperforming per se. It just was a unfortunate situation that I think cost him a solid finish that he could build on. Honorable mention, Nico Hulkenberg. I mean, we talked about it a little bit, the disqualification, the qualifying laps being deleted. Like I said earlier, this isn't his fault by any means, unless he told the team to set up his car with a low ride height, but I doubt that. So I do feel bad for him. But yeah, my loser is Carlos Sainz. And who's yours? Aston Martin.
I had Aston Martin. Yep. Let's get into some driver standings. Since the race is over, let's get into that. Lando Norris at 77, his teammate Oscar Piastri at 74, Max Verstappen 69, George Russell 63 rounds out your top four. Charles Leclerc, Kimi Antonelli, Lewis Hamilton, all within 7 points, but 32 is where Charles is at, so quite a ways behind already. Of the leaders, Alex Albon 18, Ocon 14, Lance Stroll 10, Gasly 6, Hulk 6, Behrman 6, Yuki Tsunoda 5, Isaac Hadjar 4, Carlos Sainz 1, and Alonso, Lawson, Duhan, and Bortoleto all without points this year. Teams, Aston Martin at McLaren at 151, Mercedes at 93, so quite a big lead for them. Red Bull Racing 71, Ferrari at 57 after their good points all this weekend. Haas at 20, Williams at 19, Aston Martin 10, Racing Bulls or VCarb at 7, Alpine at 6, and Kick Sauber at 6. Do you have anything else you want to wrap up with the Bahrain Grand Prix?
No, one stat that I think was really interesting from the weekend was I heard that they have not resurfaced the track at all since it opened, which is extremely surprising.
Like 2003? Is that what it was?
That's insane. Or 2004?
Yeah, something crazy.
It's like 20 years old, that surface. So I think that helps explain the high tire degradation that the cars, the tires experienced during the race, just because it hasn't been resurfaced. But we've noticed in Suzuka and in China that resurfacing leads to some pretty fast lap times and low tire degradation, which can possibly hurt racing. Isn't always the case, but something to keep our eyes on. Maybe they'll resurface it sometime in the future, but yeah, kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, it's a crazy stat. I think the track is older, or the surface is older than Kimi Antonelli and Oliver Behrman, which
what? That's wild.
Yeah, which is crazy because I think they were both born in like 2006 or something like that. So, yeah, crazy stat. The asphalt is older than a couple of the drivers at a racetrack. So there's that. But yeah, this will conclude this episode of the Pit Lane, a Formula One podcast. We look forward to having you after Saudi Arabia next week for the Saudi Arabia. Holy cow, I cannot talk. The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Holy cow, got it. All right, we'll see you next time, all then.
See you next time, Jordan.
Bye.